some of the challenges of adolescence. We know today that about 14% of adolescents aged 13 to 18 experience a mood disorder. And what we mean by that is something like depression, sadness. That's about 14% of teens. About a third of teens experience an anxiety disorder, and about 19% are diagnosed with some kind of behavior disorder. 11% of teens have a substance use disorder. So this might be around alcohol or drugs, narcotics, opiates. So what that means overall is about a quarter of all teens have some kind of severe impairment or distress that they live with every day. And a few more statistics. From 2012 to 2015, depression increased among girls by 50% and among boys by 21%. And in 2014, compared to 2007, among those teens aged 12 to 14, 3 times as many girls and 2 times as many boys took their own lives. I want to say that again because that is just to me an absolutely astounding statistic. So in 2014, compared to 2007, among those teens who are 12 to 14, 3 times as many girls, twice as many boys took their own lives. And this was pre-pandemic. We know that now things are much worse. So, knowing that teens are having a really hard time, how can self-compassion help? How can self-compassion help to mitigate some of these problems that youth are experiencing? So in order to do this, what I'd like to do is give you a definition of self-compassion first. But actually, I'm not going to give it to you. I'm going to let you discover it for yourselves. And we're going to do this through an exercise. So if you have something to write with and something to write on nearby, that would be great. If not, you can do this exercise in your head. And what I'd like you to do is think of a time when a good friend of yours was having a really hard time. They had a really hard day. Something happened that made them feel really inadequate, unworthy. Maybe they felt like a loser. And they came to you. What did you say to them? And what tone of voice did you use? Perhaps what were your body, what was your body posture, or what gestures did you use? If you can't think of a time, think of what you might say if this were to happen. And I'll give you a few minutes to think about this. Okay. Now what I would like you to do is think of a time when you felt like you failed, when you had a really hard time. Maybe you had a difficult day. You maybe had a problem at work or difficult conversation with somebody at home, with your child or with a partner, or um, you you felt badly about yourself. You felt inadequate. You felt perhaps like a loser. You felt unworthy. What words did you say to yourself? And what tone of voice did you use? Now, I'll give you another minute or so to think about this. And again, if you have something to write with and something to write on, you can jot this down. Okay. So if you're like most people, in fact, about 80% of us, you treat yourself much more harshly than you treat your good friends. You say things to yourself that you would never in a million years say to a good friend. You have a very different tone of voice with yourself than you do with a good friend. And so one way that we define self-compassion is when we're dealing with difficulties and challenging times, treating yourself the way you would treat a good friend. Saying the kinds of words to yourself that you say to your good friends. So that's the informal definition of self-compassion. And there's a more formal definition of self-compassion as well. And this definition was offered by Dr. Kristin Neff in 2003. And it has 3 different components. So the first component of self-compassion is mindfulness. And within this definition, mindfulness means having a balanced perspective. So in these times, during these times when you're struggling, when you're having a hard day, or you're feeling inadequate, understanding and knowing that this is not the end of the world, that this will pass, and not spinning out. So what I mean by that is what we tend to do when something bad happens to us is we tend to think that, this is the end of the world. Well, I had this difficult conversation with my supervisor at work, and I know what's going to happen. I know what this means. I know it means that I'm going to come into work tomorrow, and they're going to call me into their office, and they're going to tell me that I don't have my job anymore. I'm going to be fired. And I know I'm not going to be able to get another job because this is going to be on my resume. So I'm going to end up living out on the streets and eating out of garbage cans. And so our minds tend to do this, right? Now, this is a little bit of an exaggeration, but our minds tend to spiral out in this way. So the opposite extreme of mindfulness on the other side of the spectrum is what we call over-identification or catastrophizing. We tend to catastrophize about the situation. So mindfulness is just having a balanced perspective, understanding that this is going to pass. Maybe it wasn't my best moment, but it's not the end of the world. The second component of self-compassion is common humanity. Common humanity is the understanding that these feelings that we experience in these moments, these feelings of hurt or anger or sadness or frustration, are just part of being human. And as human beings, we all experience them. Now, this may sound like something that we know all the time. Intellectually, we do know it. But when we're actually in that place, when it actually happens to us, we tend to forget. We tend to think that we are the only ones, that this only happens to us. We're the only one who has difficult conversations with our supervisor at work, or we're the only ones who have children who are arguing with us. Everybody else's children are really well behaved, So we tend to isolate ourselves, and we tend to feel very much alone. So again, common humanity is the understanding that these are that we're part of a humanity, of a population of people roaming around on this planet that experience just the same kinds of emotions that we do. And then the third component of self-compassion is self-kindness. The opposite of self-kindness, or the opposite extreme on the other end of the spectrum, is self-judgment or self-criticism. So in these moments when we're having a difficult time, we can choose to be kind to ourselves, to treat ourselves the way we would treat a good friend. But that's not generally what we tend to do. We tend to be really hard on ourselves. We tend to even say mean things to ourselves. We might say things to ourselves like, ugh, you're such an idiot. You're so stupid. Why do you say such stupid things? You know better than that, But we don't have to. So part of self-compassion is understanding that we can be kind to ourselves. And there's an active component to self-kindness. It's actually about doing something nice for ourselves, or saying something nice to ourselves, saying these kind words to ourselves, or maybe even doing what we call behavioral self-compassion. And this means going for a walk, perhaps, or having a nice, relaxing cup of tea. If you're a teen, this might mean, maybe calling up a friend, talking to a friend on the phone, doing something fun, something that you enjoy doing.